Yeah, so today we're talking about fear, and it was really brought about by thinking about what Trump and Bernie supporters, people who want to make a difference, what is it that's motivating, especially, in my opinion, not the opinion of the station or its underwriters, what motivates Trump supporters especially. And I sort of thought that fear is a big motivator. And then when you think about all the fear that you're bombarded with every day, all day on news stations, the news media, what bleeds leads, and you're bombarded all day with threats to our civilization, threats to our personal health, and to, it feels insurmountable. And I think we're actually on this show, I think we're kind of guilty of as well, 'cause,
promoting a little fear.
Our topics are often quite stressful, I'd say. But
like extinction?
Well, yeah, just extinction. What? Yeah, it's only extinction. And so I was interested in hearing what our listeners have to say about fear. If they think that if they've noticed irrational fears increasing, or what do they fear? What are your personal fears? I know what my personal fears are, and
they are?
Well, so I'm not afraid of spiders. I'm wary of snakes. I'm afraid of, I guess I'm fearful, actually, believe it or not, fearful of public speaking, but I think that's a pretty normal thing. I'm fearful of...
well, on that topic, do you consider this public speaking?
Yeah, but it's great to be sitting in a studio with a microphone and not being able to see the audience out there.
You don't look fearful to me right now, are
you? I'm pretty comfortable in the studio, actually. But no, I think I just have sort of, regular fears. I'm not scared of flying. Heights are a little bit of a problem. I don't go up on roofs anymore when I'm doing construction. I leave that to the young guys. Actually, I don't know what my fears are. Let me think.
Well, are you fearful of that sign we see on the road that says radar enforced?
I'm wary. I become more aware when I see that sign, yes. Although, does it make a difference? Anyway, I think we have a caller, maybe. Let's see if they're still on the line.
Yes, hi, caller. What's your name, please?
Yep.
Hello?
They're gone. So in researching this, I've found some wonderful books, and I also found a website that was about a conference that was held a couple of years ago on fear in the 21st century. It was held in the UK, so it had a pretty European bent, but it really sums up. There's a list of fears here, and I think half of the fears that are listed here are 21st century fears.
I have a fear of lists.
A fear of lists. Listophobia. So there's all the usual stuff, right? Physical health fears, so newly emerging diseases. But we hear all these terrible pandemics that are happening. Somebody gets sick. West Nile virus hits a horse in Nicasio, and suddenly we're all under threat, and the mosquito guys want to come out and spray us all.
Well, so that relates to the fact that we're now all aware of everything that happens throughout the globe.
Exactly. And that's, so that's another point. So I was pointing out, let's see, Murray sent an email, as he always does, and wonderful email, and wonderful that he's thinking about it. And he was questioning whether we're really more fearful than we used to be as a society, as a species, maybe.
Well, I'd like to come in here because I see a real difference in the way children are being raised, which I think can be attributed to the rise of fear. When Saturday come, when I was growing up, we would hit that screen door and be gone. They didn't know where we were. We were on our bikes. We didn't have helmets. We were gone all day, and we just had to be back when the streetlights were on. You don't see that very much today.
No.
Everybody knows exactly where their kids are at every single moment. They're helicoptering their children. The kids really don't have that spaciousness and lack of fear that we have. Everything is fearful. We walk to school. Kids don't even walk to school anymore.
No.
Many kids don't even walk to school anymore. No. So I think this is an indication that it has increased. It has increased dramatically because the increase in media, in social media, and everything else has just, even if that was the tendency of the 4 radio stations and 5 television stations we used to have, now it's in the thousands. So that has increased exponentially and affected our children. I think that's my biggest fear. My biggest fear is for the children, because I would hope that they could have at least an inkling of the freedom that we felt when we were growing up. And they're being impacted by this.
Interesting.
I agree with what Mary said, especially, and I want to take this further, the exponential part. I think that maybe 200 years ago, I don't know how many advertisements or things that were thrown at us that we had to process, that we were hearing or seeing or whatever engaged in. Maybe there were 100 a day, and then that probably went to 200 a day, and that probably went to 400 a day. And I think we're probably getting 2,000 a day now, just of any kind of message that in some way is trying to affect us, to affect our behavior maybe. And let's say only half of them use the fear thing. Well, clearly there is more fear coming at us, or maybe triggers for fear. The fear, though, is our response to it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we can indeed possibly choose not to be so fearful.
Well, it's designed, that kind of presentation is designed to elicit fear.
Yeah.
And you see that on the increase, too, as people become numb to violence. It becomes even more violence. People become numb to, like genuine sex, and it goes to terribly pornographic sex. So it's upping as we become accustomed to the norm. The norm goes up. And I think it has a bad effect, especially on the kids.
And so it's so we're talking about physiological effects and mental effects of being in permanent stress all the time, right? And so we're basically suffering PTSD. And kids who are denoted as being ADD or whatever it is they're calling it now, kids being kids, basically. They're given Ritalin and Adderall and all that, and that creates symptoms that are similar to PTSD when they take those stimulants.
And violent behavior. Often.
I got an email to our post in the San Gerolamo Valley, and this is from Dana Tognini. And she says, provoking a war with Russia is my biggest fear, but our foreign policy in general is destabilizing the Middle East and creating a breeding ground for violent religious radicals and mercenaries who see insurgency as the only remaining job opportunity. This probably speaks for a lot of people, does it not?
Yeah, well, that's, I think that's probably a thing to be fearful of for those countries. Whether it's a threat that we need to be worried about here.
It's a big part of our politics.
It sure is.
Yeah.
Because, the military budget is, what is it now? It's bigger than most countries' budgets.
It's bigger than we can afford.
Right. And so, there's big money in creating and maintaining a level of fear. It sells products. If TV stations are broadcasting fearful messages all the time, that's why they have the scroll bar at the bottom. It's not so that you can see the results of the baseball game. It's so that they can add more little snippets of fear as they're talking about some terrible thing.
And that makes you watch as an addict, right? I mean, it's like you're almost addicted to that constant adrenaline rush that comes from them feeding you the triggers for fear.
And that was one of the things that Murray questioning whether we are more fearful now. And it occurred to me that we probably don't have the filters built in. We're not used, our species is not accustomed yet to being bombarded by so much information that is designed to make us scared. And we don't know, we can't filter out what's just sort of advertising and what isn't. We're built to react to stressors. And when we are that way, then our body goes into fight or flight, or we just freeze. And what, of course, they want you to do is just freeze and watch the pretty blue light behind them.
Or perhaps buy something.
Or, well,
because it could be a fear of not being enough. You see this with the teenage girls so much. It's an image is presented, and in order to be like that, you have to buy these products, dress a certain way. I read a statistic because I was researching next week's show that over half young girls and a third of young boys are afraid of being overweight. Now, these are children.
Yeah.
And that was absolutely media-driven.
Sure.
What kid, when we were growing up, worried about that?
Right.
Maybe nobody,
Right.
I wanted to, what you said, Paul, for me, raised the notion that it's all built in, this idea that there can be advertising that you have to learn to ignore, where it is what is leading. They're trying to lead behavior that is economics, so that there's a product being sold or a service being sold through the fear mechanism or whatever mechanism. And then there is what you can trust, in terms of what comes from a non-profit place. But we've allowed that in, so it's part of our capitalist system that you are allowed to have the private property of a message, and it doesn't even need to be all that truthful. That there are lines by which the government and we the people draw, and we say, beyond this, we're going to hold you responsible for the damage that you do. But within this range, we're going to consider that just normal business, and that's what we're talking about. And that's what is bombarding. And Mary, you talk about the children, and you're so right, but all of us, whether we're 90 years old or not, we're still being bombarded with this stuff.
But the kids have even less defenses and filters for that, and are more willing to take it in as gospel, and that's a concern.
Or maybe kids with seeing so much of it can actually come to see it more easily.
Well, that is happening too.
Yeah, I read a study where they're looking at kids, and they actually said that kids' brains are different from ours. I mean, they're changing, they're evolving to actually deal with some of this, that they have filters, but that the price that they pay for that is that they just don't remember stuff. In which case, they're more like me.
It goes back around, doesn't it? But but the average kid apparently is spending about 10 hours a day between their cell phones, their iPods, and social media, and television, and movies. That's a lot of media.
Right.
Well, the fear that is being provoked there is the fear of not fitting in, of being included, the fear that you might be so poorly dressed that people are going to shun you and you're going to be excluded and you're going to be sitting by yourself. And it's the clothes you wear that you're afraid you're going to be shunned by your peers as not good enough.
Sure. Well, and that goes on up through the age scale, doesn't it? Because if you don't own a house by the time you're 35, then suddenly you're a failure. Or if you don't have $1 million in your bank account by the time you're 40, then you're a failure as a man. Anyway, men are supposed to be millionaires by the time they're 40.
And if you haven't had a bankruptcy, then you're not really in business.
You're not really a businessman. So there was a survey done by a university in Southern California, which, I don't know how much credence I put in it. It's a private university.
Why? Because it's in Southern California?
Well, it's a private, I think it's a Christian university. But they did a survey, the top 10 fears of 2015, and the top of the list, I don't know what demographic they were surveying, but top of the list was corruption of government officials. Next came cyber terrorism. Then
Can we comment on these as you go through them?
Yeah, sure.
The fear is what? That government officials are going to be corrupt? I don't understand that fear because I expect it.
Yeah, right. They're afraid of the effects, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So they're not really trusting the system, or they don't trust the people currently in power.
Right. Yeah. Which is, I think that's
I would not trust the system. Yeah,
that's a genuine fear. Yeah. It's a reasonable fear. Cyber terrorism next.
Well, yeah. I mean, cyber bullying is a big one. When you were mentioning kids, I know that That's a big fear of a lot of parents letting their kids on, that they're going to get bullied by their peers or worse, be influenced by unsavory characters.
Right, and cyber terrorism, I guess that would involve hacking into military, the U.S. military computers and starting a war. That's a wonderful thing. Number 3, corporate...
Or preventing one.
Good heavens.
I trust the anonymous group that does that sort of thing more than I trust the people that are trying to keep them out.
Corporate tracking of personal information. Well, that's a given now, isn't it?
Well,
there is no privacy.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, isn't that huge? I mean, it's become incredible that, and they call it data mining when they have the software that knows how to navigate through all that data and to put it together from this source, that source, and build this multidimensional profile of us. You know, we sometimes, I have a fear of actually not being a human anymore, but being this digitized entity that is in all the... So when the government thinks of me, it's what's in their computer. When the company thinks of me, it's what's in their computer. Sure. And so I have all these records of me that presume to be me.
You're just a little patch of zeros and ones. That's all we are.
And that makes it ever so much more effective when you are designing, for example, a marketing plan, a political platform. When at the television station where I used to work, they would pay companies, a lot of money to do market research. What do women 18 to 34 buy? What do they watch, etc. Well, now they have it down to minutia through Facebook and everything else. They know exactly what everybody is doing all the time, what the conversations are, where they go, what they like, what they don't like. It has never been so immense, which allows the messaging to be ever so much more targeted and effective. So
that targeting is huge now. It's like they don't spend as much money just blasting out billions of versions of something, but they spend a lot more to find you at the right time.
Yeah, you walk into the store and the chip on your credit card tells them you're there, and they know what you like, and they have all that information from what you bought online even. And
so what is our choice there? Pay cash for everything?
No,
I think just relax about it, because there's really, the cat is out of the bag. There is no such thing as privacy, so you live your life, unless you want to go into the woods and camp, where you probably get a little bit of privacy, and even that's up for grabs right now.
Build the bunker, but then you'll be on Google Earth anyway, so Number 4, actually, this is terrorist attacks. There you go. It was down to number 4.
Well, they got to they created a war around that fear.
Yeah, it's a wonderful
I've
thing.
heard that we've had more people killed by children with a gun than by terrorists with a gun.
That's true.
Government tracking of personal information. Well, it just makes government more efficient, doesn't it?
Well, to what we were talking about, getting exponentially more data on everybody, and so our privacy is in the hugeness of the stack of hay, so that our little needle is harder to find because the stack of hay is so big.
Yeah, but the thread remains, so that if somebody needs to know something, if you were ever involved with such and such, the thread will still go.
We need
there.
to clip off the thread, just cut it off. If we can escape our history.
And we look at it as unavoidable, and that they can hear everything we're saying, and everything they're collecting about us is perfect and correct, and yet there are people on the no-fly list who just happen to have the same name as some other person,
But Edward Snowden really made me think that that's true. I mean, it makes me... I don't know that I fear it so much just because of what we're talking about. I have no expectation of privacy anymore, but the notion that I haven't been tagged, I'd feel like is an insult, that they're not really listening well.
Well, you can have some of my tags. I'll give you some.
Okay. I don't think you get to control them. It's sort of not like improving your credit.
No, I'm just...
So it's interesting. So all the way down here, I mean, there's other things like biowarfare, identity theft, economic collapse was number 8.
Well, biowarfare, I mean, remember we had...
Biowarfare, not just warfare, but biowarfare.
Yeah, well, but we've had these attacks in the past of these powders being mailed to somebody and they turn out to be...
Ricin. And,
arsenic? No, I'm saying there's real threats of that, and then there was the gases in Syria. I mean, I think people feel, especially dying is one thing, but dying from poison is worse or more scary.
I wonder. Yeah. Anyway, should we be afraid of it, or should we? You know that the guys in the anti-terror Homeland Security are working for our benefit, and so therefore they will be tracking all these guys down.
So would one of you guys from NSA that's listening call us at 415-663-8492? We really would like to talk to you.
Yeah, we just said trigger words now. We just said ricin, biowarfare,
Last
NSA.
week we got in trouble with the FCC. This week.
Economic collapse was number 8, and running out of money in the future. That's personal finance fears. It was way down at number 9, which I thought was interesting because that's been the driving force of the middle class for ever since there's been a middle class. That everything, you're going to lose your house, you're going to lose your job, and that the fact that it's down at number 9, I think that tells me that maybe they were surveying students rather than
or surveying Marin County, maybe.
Yes.
So, I mean,
if
you ask affluent people, I think less of them are worried about it. They feel quite secure that the system will take care of them in some way or another.
There's all those buffers that are put in place for that.
But there's lots of people, indeed, living day to day where the fear is, where will I get shelter tonight? Where will I eat tomorrow? Yeah. Where won't I be thrown out of, or can I get myself in a jail cell? Right,
and there was a article in one of the big magazines, in the Atlantic, 47% of Americans apparently, if they were asked to find $400 in cash, would not be able to do it. Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. That's half the population.
Yeah.
Could not find a couple of hundred.
The politicians do speak of this, especially now, I think, but a lot of it is still around helping the middle class. It's almost like, the poor will do what we have to, but not recognizing that it's become so lopsided that the amount of wealth concentrated in so few has become unethical, really.
And it's interesting that the corruption of the financial scale, that only Bernie Madoff went to jail because he was messing with the 1%.
He did it to the wrong people.
He did it to the wrong. Everybody else got bonuses.
Yeah.
And when Bernie went to jail, what did he warn us of? He says, if you only knew. And in a way, he was saying that the stuff that's done with government blessing that comes out of the Treasury Department and Citibank or whatever, all of that collusion is really not that much different than what he did. It's just what he did is outside of the control of the big system. He worked inside job, and they don't allow that kind of competition.
Yeah,
there's a monopoly on how to rip off people.
When it's on an international scale, like the World Bank and IMF, all those guys, they're doing basically the same thing. It's all these Ponzi schemes and corruption of other governments to make them do what we want them to do.
Oh, and we have a caller. Caller, what's your name, please?
My name's David.
Hi, David. Thanks for calling.
Yeah. Well, I have a fear that's probably fairly common. I think when something really bad has happened to you in your life, and I'm speaking of my own life, then the fear of that happening again or something similar happening again, and I'm speaking specifically of being robbed about a year ago.
Oh.
And, I have an open door in my store, and I have valuable things out, and it's if somebody wants to come in and point a gun at me, I'm going to give it to them again, although I'm a little better protected this time, but still. And I think this is true of many kinds of trauma. I think specifically of somebody who gets raped or somebody who is somebody's forced to be around people who they feel vulnerable to. And it made me realize that there are some really, tempted to say a bleepable word here, but I won't, but really crappy people who will think nothing of inflicting that kind of trauma for their own greed, or for their own desires, for whatever they may be. And it's something that you just have to learn to live with, because it is a real possibility.
David, this is Bernie. I appreciate you saying what you did. I hadn't thought about it. The idea that once you've experienced something and had the whole emotional and your body involved in that, like you with being robbed, then that has a bigger imprint in your fear cabinet than things that you haven't experienced, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So, and how has this changed your experience of coming to your store every day? I mean,
it's made it less welcoming to me. I still enjoy it, and I'm still lucky to be doing a lot of what I like. But I carry a panic button in my pocket, and when a single mail or a couple of mails come into my store, I have my hand on that button.
And what's the button do?
It'll call the police.
Oh, great.
It goes right to, well, it goes to my alarm company, which hopefully calls the police.
And there are protocols that you can do to release trauma from the body. Have you explored any of that?
Well, I don't feel like I have any trauma in the body. I think I've dealt with the PTSD part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I know that if I want to go back into reliving that incident, that I can bring up a whole lot of chemicals in my body which I don't enjoy having. I can't imagine ever getting rid of that, but I just don't do that very often.
Mm-hmm.
But PTSD and fear are different.
Yeah.
They're very different. One is PTSD is about re-experiencing it or feeling like it's imminent. And if something happens, if a noise goes off or something like that, then, you can go right back into it. And
when you say they're different, that is something that I don't understand, David. But is it that the PTSD is sort of the high end of fear, and if there's a range of fear?
I'm not even sure that it's fear.
Okay.
I mean, you can. I think you can have PTSD and not really be afraid.
Okay.
But when something happens to trigger it, you can just go right back into it. And the stories are classic of somebody who's come back from a war and sleeping peacefully with his wife 5 years later, and suddenly there's a loud noise, and suddenly everybody is the enemy.
Yeah.
You're right back in the foxholes or the trenches or whatever. And that's a different thing than being afraid of something that might happen, conceptually, and that could be economic collapse or losing a spouse or getting sick or fear of being robbed again, fear of somebody coming in and pointing a gun at me. It's a different phenomenon.
David, I'm struck by how brave you are to call in and talk at such a personal level. So thank you so much.
Well, I've thought a lot about it, of course, and I thought about, I don't know if you saw what I wrote after I got robbed, but there was a piece called Lemonade, which went around town. Mm-hmm. I've tried to be as public as possible about it, and also being public here means letting people know that there are some really crappy people who either live here or are here a lot or know about this place. I talked to a friend in Petaluma she has a friend, or she was talking to somebody who robbed houses for a living. And he said, you know what, just go over to the coast. They don't lock their doors over there. It's really easy.
Yeah. Well, we've been discovered by all kinds of people, so that's part of the price we pay.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, David. That's really...
Yes, thank you for calling.
Thank you for calling. That's
well, you're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye.
And what David was talking about then, the emotional memory, which is what fear does for us, is it teaches us lessons about dangers. When something is in your emotional memory center, it's there for a long time. And there's something called reconsolidation, which is where, like people who are afraid of spiders, every time they see a spider, it reinforces the fear that they have of them. It's like the researchers I read, they said it's like pulling up a word file, changing the font and putting it and saving it. So you're always kind of updating it, and it gets deeper and deeper into your memory bank, into your emotional memory. So something like being held up at gunpoint is definitely an emotional memory, and that's it's going to affect the way he deals with people, and from now on, of course, and he'll be more wary and more. But there are aware.
ways of
taking
that out of your fear.
So, especially they did a study of arachnophobic people. They exposed them to spiders, and they freaked out, of course, and then they gave them a dose of beta blockers, propranolol. And they did this for a series of days, and within a few days, they were able to actually stroke a tarantula. Now
impressive.
That's pretty amazing. So that because that beta blockers, they block that path they stop the reconsolidation. They block the path to the emotional memory.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, I want to hang on to my arachnophobic fear, because that's one that I'm not really looking for therapy on. I like it.
So you're afraid of spiders. What else are you afraid of?
Oh, what am I afraid of? Oh, my God, pit bulls. But, I was bitten by a dog twice. Not a pit bull, but I've bought into this story that I know is not fair. I know that most pit bulls are quite nice. It's just I've bought into the cultural story, and so I'm definitely afraid of them and snakes. And then on a broader scale, our ecological collapse, whether there's going to be a space for future generations to still live on this planet in some form or another. I fear not having economic collapse in time to save the planet. Other people I know are worried about the economic collapse, so I'm running against the stream on that baby. I'm also kind of fearful, I believe, of not having a meaningful legacy. I'm getting on in age, and I feel like I did a lot, and I created children and helped facilitate grandchildren, I guess, through that process. And so I've procreated, I've done business, but in my activism role, I'm still feeling unfulfilled. I'm still feeling this notion that I won't get a chance to really realize a contribution in the scale that I could imagine.
A fear of time running out before you've done your thing.
Also just having my thoughts be so different from everybody else's, which is not an irrational fear, by the way. But enough about me.
That's a fear of what? Rejection by your peers, or
I think it's not even a rejection. It's just not being understood. Just feeling like in the old days, I would be on my mother's hand walking, and she'd say there'd be some guy over there on a soapbox saying something. She'd, don't pay attention to him. He's crazy. It's sort of that notion. Now I'm the guy on the soapbox,
right?
And mothers are telling their
kids. Proud of
that. And so that's a little bit scary.
The crazy man on the box.
Let's see who we've got as a caller. What's your name, please?
Crazy woman on the box.
Oh, hi, lady.
Melinda.
Hi, Melinda.
Well, I think it's a big issue that our whole culture has become fearful due to the cultural everything that you've been mentioning, the media, and how in your blurb that went with before you had the program, you said that little things are blown up to be giant things, a small incident, and definitely that works. And I'm afraid of the fact that people have no problem with taking their shoes off to get on an airplane. They don't question it. We're not questioning anything. We've become so, not everybody, but the majority, I think, would just like to give it a pass. And to me, that's worrisome. I don't know if I'm afraid of it, but I'm wary, as Paul would say.
That they're turning us into obeyers, obedient people.
We're very malleable, people.
Sure.
And
but is that new? Has that not been going on for quite a while?
Oh, well, I'm 78, and I don't think this kind of stuff. Well, I guess it was, actually.
Remember the 50s.
Maybe on a different scale. Now it's all sped up, right?
As a small kid listening to the radio, and it was about buying war bonds, and this was World War II.
Yeah.
And so there was that fear was around, and I think kids are less affected by it if they're free kids. We ran around the neighborhood, and I had nightmares about the Japanese coming and finding my hiding spots that I had already figured out in advance. But I think it's a fear of our own inadequacy, too, which is also sort of a subtext.
Yes, people feel helpless.
Well, and inadequate.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of that whole thing about sale. You won't be okay unless you buy this ridiculous thing. But mine is I'm inadequate about keeping current with technology, and I don't. And it's also distasteful to me to even try to do it. So I don't. But I know I feel like, I'm just not quite smart enough to do all that. And, still have time for a life.
Melinda,
it may be a sign of great intelligence. Don't be too hard on yourself. You'll actually have time to live your day.
Yeah, well, I have a positive idea for everybody. Michael Ratner died a few days ago.
Yes.
And so anyway, check out the Amy Goodman's treatment of that today. It's very encouraging, and I think we need to, instead of being fearful, look to the people who aren't, who have spent their lives being very humble and generous with their time and energy and intelligence, and actually helped people.
Yes, we need to hear way more from people like that.
Yeah. So
excellent. Melinda, I listen to Democracy Now! Every morning religiously because I do see it as a model for really taking a hard look at things. But I wanted to comment on when you mentioned you're getting on an airplane and you're going through the TSA and not questioning taking your shoes off and stuff. It made me say, why aren't we questioning, why do we need planes in the first place? Why are we getting on a plane in the first place?
Oh, that's big, yeah.
Well, but see, my fear is that we're never going to address the big issues in time, that we're going to spend so much time on all the little stuff that bombards us.
Yeah,
but sometimes...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Well, sometimes if you take care of the little stuff, the big stuff takes care of itself. Then the little stuff, which impacts people in a very deep and personal way, allows people to join forces with other people who share that, and that can become a movement. So I don't discount that. That can be actually very powerful.
Yes, and there's one other thing. The whole thinking only about the future is maybe a little bit counterproductive, because the present has a lot to offer. And anyway, I've just been out picking nettles, and probably illegally in the park.
Uh-oh, we gotcha.
And I hear people who are afraid to go out alone because they're worried about animals. Like, there's mountain lions out there. And then I realized, well, I'm more afraid of stray people.
Humans.
I'm afraid of the nettles. They hurt me.
But I've kind of overcome that. But it is, I think, people are scarier than any animals around here anyway.
Yeah.
And biowarfare is already going on, in case you hadn't noticed.
Right.
With the industrial agriculture. And
sure.
another great thing to check out is Vedanta Shiva's recent talk in Berkeley, where
she was amazing.
An eloquent thing, and that's the biowarfare that we're inhabiting. Okay, I'm going to shut up.
Excellent call. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melinda.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about the present day compared with previous times. My thought was that in previous times it was in village life, I'm thinking of medieval times, where you didn't know anything beyond a sphere of a few miles if you were just one of the people, the peasants. And if something went wrong, if the plague came to your village, then it must have been someone's fault, and you found a scapegoat. It was either God or Satan, in which case you went to church and you prayed a lot, or you found a witch and you drowned her or burned her or whatever, and fixed everything, right, for a little while.
It was
got sick again.
Simpler then.
But that's the same. Like Trump is still catering to the same reactions, because it's a visceral reaction in us. There must be some reason. There must be some other person doing this to me. Yeah. Yeah.
Melinda gave us good advice, saying maybe not worry about the future. Worry about the present. One thing I think about is that a lot of people do fear for the future, what the future will be, and I have those fears for my grandchildren and stuff. But one thing I see in the business that I do as a realtor is people, the greatest anxiety is not knowing about a house that's on the market that they might have been able to buy.
Right.
You know, and so they're driven to see everything, to know everything, to make sure that they covered all their bases. And I don't think that's atypical of our lives. We have all this anxiety about, are we missing something? And that's the opposite of the tangible experience you've had, like David talked about, or the fears that are, you know, about other creatures. This is something about the future that we want to control, fear of not being able to predict it. Or
There's a sale at Nordstrom's. I can't miss it.
That's kind of the razor's edge. We have to be aware of what's going on and knowledgeable about what's going on, but we can't let that blind us to the moment, to the now, to living your daily life in a way that has meaning. And sometimes if you're worrying too much about the future, you forget about living your life. And when we're bombarded to this degree and forced to look here, there, everywhere, boom, 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 it's very important to take the time to drop in and be grateful. And I think that's a good panacea for a lot of this.
Let's not forget that most
fear.
of us are healthier and more comfy in our lives than we ever have been as a species, and yet we may be more fearful than ever.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're necessarily happier.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
We have an anonymous email that came into the office. The everyday human fear of being hurt by another human, random or targeted, is the biggest fear for me. There you go. Thank you.
I wonder if that's a combination of the physical pain and the mental anguish of being violated. I mean, I think the mental injury of having your personhood violated. You talked about rape. You talked about other. Those must be really intense. You know.
Well, as someone who was actually raped at gunpoint, which I was.
Wow.
It was a big one. There's no question about it. But I would like to address this to David if you're still listening. It took a long time to take that fear away from me, but it is possible, and it is also necessary, and it is stored in the muscle, and it can affect every single thing you do from that robbery on. But we're bigger than that. We are much, much bigger than that, and we can heal ourselves. And I think the more that we can listen to people who have healed themselves, people who are doing good work instead of violent work, the more images and information we get about people who are turning us in a better direction is the best ammunition we have to, what we're being deluged with.
Right. Well, give us a call, 415-663-8492. We've got a few minutes left for you to call in and tell us what your fears are. Why not?
Paul, you mentioned Trump as an example, and that's the easy one.
Right.
But I would venture to say that both Hillary and Bernie, too, can be accused of fear-mongering.
Sure.
It may be in a more subtle way, but there's still this underlying, there's something wrong out there that you need to be afraid of, and I'm the answer to the best path forward.
And the problem is corruption in government, or it's...
But we all can see it on the other side. In other words, Democrats can see Trump in spades. Sorry. And Trump followers can see this socialist nonsense in spades, and this, Benghazi cover-up that's so obvious.
Right. Yeah.
But it's easy for us to see it in others, but it's hard for us to see it in ourselves.
Well, it's the vitriol, though, isn't it? The anger that comes out of that fear that's so worrisome. The fact that on all sides that there are so many people out there who, because of their fear, perhaps, and are angry. I mean, they're really angry. It's a good thing that people are angry because, on one hand, because the system is corrupt and politics is bought, but on the other hand, this sort of finding scapegoat anger, right? It must be the Muslims or it's the Mexicans stealing our livelihoods.
Pinning it on cultural and societal groups and classes and all. Yeah, but there is a class warfare on both sides. But the one that's more like Mein Kampf is indeed coming from the far right and is usurped. I'm not sure that Trump held these beliefs as strongly as he's learned to read what the racist voters want.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. I think he tapped into what's out there.
Yeah. And
I don't know if he read about it. That's just his natural way,
Yeah,
He's a bully.
I think he's tapping into that that level of sort of ignorance and anger out there that's a little scary because, if Trump doesn't win and if we get whoever as president and it's not Trump, those people are not going away, right? They're still going to be out there.
Neither are the hard left progressives.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but there's going to be fewer people because I heard people say if Trump becomes president, I'm going to Canada. So I don't know if I believe him or not.
I'm not so sure they're happy about that up there. Where was it? It was Prince Edward Island said, yeah, you can come here. A little chilly up there. But yeah, I'm not sure that. Certainly, we live in an age of fear that it seems unreasonable to me. It's just because we are comfy, we're coddled. Most of us, the vast majority of us, some of us are far too coddled, in fact. But in this country, at least, what really. What do we fear from the world? Well, we're afraid of nature. We're like you were saying, we're afraid of spiders and tigers and bears and
but I mean that's just easy for me to say all those things and I do, but I think honestly I'm probably not on a fear level anywhere close to 10 if it's a 1 to 10 range. Sure. My fears are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can't imagine any of them getting over halfway. Right. So when I hear people who've experienced a violation and then fearful of that repeating, I can only imagine that. I don't really have that sensation in me. So I probably should answer that I'm really not that fearful.
Yeah, I think I'm not. And you've overcome that to an extent anyway.
Well, you're talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably less fearful than I've ever been in my entire life. Maybe that's age. Maybe it's the work I've done. Maybe it's the faith that has grown tremendously in me since every day it seems to increase, which is a great comfort to me. But the stuff that we have absolutely no control over, we have to let go. It's like we have to do as much as we possibly can, but then we have to be aware of all these horrendous things that are going on around us. But we still have to go to birthday parties and have a good time and love our children and love each other, because these are the things that, if anything, can turn us in a better directions. It's those qualities. And the more we live in that space, the less fear you have.
You can't avoid people unless you're just going to be a recluse for the rest of your life and
that's no fun.
Have stuff delivered to your door. What's the point?
That's where the new technology has become such a problem. What you're talking about, Mary, is so right, that we need that personal connection in time, talking to each other, supporting each other, understanding each other, listening. But the technology that allows us to communicate more than we've ever communicated in the past is missing out on that level of person to person. Yeah,
there's a big disconnect. You're not reading people's emotions. There's no mirror neuron activity going on. You're not feeling empathy. You're just typing away. If I just text you, I'll be there in 10 minutes. You don't know why I'm coming. Right, exactly. You go, uh-oh.
All the more reason to gather when we possibly can.
Exactly.
It's very important. I remember when growing up, in the house, people would come over for coffee in the morning with my mother. There was that visiting thing happening that was just like heaven to me as a child, because it was so sweet. It was so very, very sweet and so personal and so touching.
And there's a disconnect. I mean, living in cities, there's an anonymity to living in cities that's partly, I guess, caused by... Maybe it isn't fear, maybe it's just being uncomfortable, or you can't be bothered to talk to your neighbors. And the same is actually true in some parts of Inverness, apparently, where people don't even know they know. Oh, I didn't know my neighbor, so I didn't tell him his house was being burgled. The disconnects that are happening. Maybe that's not fear. I think that's just... Well, one disconnect clearly is our affluence as a society. You talked about being with your family and your children and support. So many children that grow up move away. They fly to the East Coast. They go up to Seattle, as one of our offspring has done and stuff. And so you have to look forward to Thanksgiving or Christmas or some special day to have that time together anymore. And that was all from the affluence where
kids now can get a job when they're out of school, then they can get their own apartment, they get their own wheels, and so they're not dependent as we once were when we lived in multi-generational housing.
Right. Well,
So we can take the old people and send them off to outsource somebody to take care of them, and the kids can escape. Sure. And so we don't really have the time at home because we're all busy with our jobs and schooling, aren't we?
I think it's more of a time thing. I think people feel so much pressure to be human doings and not human beings.
Yes.
And that, the glorification of busyness, which is really a death knell as far as I'm concerned. I've heard conversation after conversation of people just going about how busy they are, and they're this and they're that and they're this and that, where probably half of those items could be taken off their to-do list. They'd have a little time to breathe and a little more time to connect.
Maybe they're afraid of having too much time on their hands.
Yeah.
Afraid of boredom.
Yeah, or afraid of feeling.
Contact, or afraid of...
Yeah, connection.
There's a lot of feeling of should in there, isn't there? Like, I should do these things that they're so busy talking about. Because the truly busy people aren't talking about what they're doing. I do believe that old adage, if you want to get something done, ask a busy person to help you. I mean, there are some people who just get things done, and some people wallow in the stuff that they have to get done.
I've never heard that one.
Oh, well.
It's a good one.
Anyway, so... Yeah, is there a cure? I don't know. I guess we need to, as a group of human beings, we have to be more conscious of what we're hearing, more adept at filtering the chaff out from the wheat. Right? I mean, we have to understand that most of what we're hearing is actually marketing, and they are playing on our emotional fears to sell products or just to sell ad space or whatever. So, yeah, let's all be a little more conscious about how we feel about things and what we're being told, and don't be afraid. And don't be afraid to call in on Thursday mornings between 11 and noon to Let's Talk.